Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another Toolbox Extra on the Educational AD podcast. We'll be right back with this week's guest, but as always, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, remember, these are all companies I used as an AD. They're all great companies. I really recommend that you check them out. So stay with us for the next 3 minutes. Here we go. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. You can schedule a live web demo to see their products in action. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Snap Raise. If you've ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and been disappointed, you need to check out Snap Raise. We used it at our school and had great success, and so will you. Go to snapraise.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast. We also want to say thank you to our good friends at Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years. As an AD, we were a Huddle school. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, go to their website and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. They're going to be a hit with your student athletes, your parents. How about your sponsors? Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to say thank you to Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform you're going to use every day. Scheduling, software, their athletic eligibility and clearance platform alone is a game changer. Go to homecampus.com. You're going to be glad you did. We want to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. My assistant AD, along with thousands of others, got his master's through the Ohio program, and it was a great experience, and you will enjoy it too. Check out Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. We want to say thank you to Hometown. Hometown is changing the game for schools and organizations with their solutions that include digital ticketing, athletic website construction, fee-free fundraising, and a whole lot more. Whether you're an athletic director, a principal, or a head coach, check out Hometown. They're going to help you raise money, save time, and bring your community together. That's hometown.com. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your coaches, your student athletes, or your parents, you're really missing out. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to connect you with not just your parents who want to complain, but with that majority of parents, sometimes as high as 98%, that support your program. And having that data is incredibly valuable. Go to athleticsurveys.com. And as always, don't forget to mention the podcast, athleticsurveys.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD podcast and one of our segments that we like to call the Toolbox Extra. Longtime listeners will certainly recognize the name of today's guest. We're going to be visiting again with Kaleb Stoppel. I should say Dr. Kaleb Stoppel. If you're new to the podcast, Kaleb is a certified master athletic administrator. He's a longtime athletic leader, athletic director in the state of Kansas, active at the state and national level. He is no longer an AD. He's out in the private sector now, but still very active, particularly as a speaker, as a blogger, and as a soon-to-be published author, usually in the area of mental health. So let's get the welcomes out of the way. Kaleb Stoppel, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Jake. Always a pleasure to be on. Thank you.
Well, you and I met several years ago. I think it was during season 1 of the podcast. Our
Mhm.
mutual friend, Dixie Westcott, introduced us. And you've been on the podcast, I would say, a number of times, always very popular with our listeners, and they're downloaded. You and I were talking before we started recording this on the topic of, burnout, let's say mental and emotional fatigue for athletic directors. And, you've been very forthcoming in sharing, your own journey. I can look back at my career as an AD and, 41 years as a teacher, a coach, 25 plus as an athletic director, sometimes doing teaching and coaching at the same time. And I know you've shared this. We loved our job. We had the greatest job in the world. But at the same time, it's easy to spread yourself too thin at the job, and then too thin at home. And my wife was a coach and a teacher, a Hall of Fame coach. Our three kids were all involved in sports. What a shock! Uh,
Mhm.
but and I tell this about myself. There were too many times in my career where um, they were at home and they needed their dad. And even if sometimes I wasn't even home, I was at school supervising a game, or I was coaching, or I was breaking down film. And even when I was home, I might have been, on the phone talking to a coach or talking to a parent, or, raising somebody else's kid, instead of my own. And, our kids all did great. They're all adults. I think I've got a pretty good relationship with them. We just met yesterday with my granddaughter, but it's looking back, and I share this in presentations I make. I coulda, shoulda done a better job. Loved being an AD. Can't imagine doing anything else for those 41 years, but it definitely had an impact on my ability and my performance as a husband, as a father, as a man. So share a little bit with the listeners, or as much as you want to, about your experience being an athletic director.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jake. And thanks also for sharing that. I know sometimes it's not easy to be kind of raw and honest like that. And I think that's part of the challenge that many of us face. And that's kind of the first step to recognizing whether you're out of balance or whether you're prioritizing the wrong things. And so I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. Because, yes, that's exactly similar to my story. For folks out there that do a great job by listening to Jake's podcast, he does a great job of impacting the world of athletic administration. And but those of you that may not know me, a little bit about my past is I did serve in education for 15 years. The later half of that was in school administration, both as an assistant principal and an athletic director. I spent a couple years at the middle school level. I spent several years at the high school level. I eventually, as a family, we decided to move, and that kind of is in the burnout story that'll come up. But we decided at some point to move, and we moved to Wichita, which is the largest city in Kansas, the largest school district of about 40,000 kids. And I was fortunate enough to get the district athletic director role there. Stayed there for about a year, but realized we missed our home back in Kansas City. So we moved back. I tried one more spot in education, but the burnout had already taken course. And so the really pivotal moment that came along, which was ironically after and really right before the straw broke the camel's back when it came to burnout, is the high school that I was at here in Kansas City. We went through an incident. And that incident, very, very short, was a report of a student bringing a gun to school that particular day. And just like any other investigations that were the responsibility of administrators to investigate, we investigated and ultimately found it to be true. And we found that student, and we safely accompanied him to my office. And when the SRO, the school resource officer, entered for some support, unfortunately, that student chose to take out the weapon, fire the weapon at the school resource officer. The school resource officer immediately returned fire. And here in this small office that we were in, I, without really thinking, jumped in the middle to try and tackle and disarm the student. And in that process, I was able to disarm him, but I was also shot. And so that happened about 3 years ago. And if you actually back up about 2 months before that, and so the shooting happened in March, so around wintertime, things were already starting to hit ahead. I had been a high school athletic director for, at that time, about 3.5 years. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I felt like I was doing good. However, the pieces that make me me and that they're still here today, but were very much emphasized when I was in my role of an AD, those of perfectionism, those of being the hardest worker, those of being attention to detail, all of those were very much seen in the work that I did. And I was proud of that. I was proud to do my work to serve the teachers I served, the coaches, the students, and the student athletes. That's why I got into administration, into leadership. And so, although I was extremely proud for the work I did, at that time, I was kind of shielded from knowing whether I was in balance or not. In fact, I never really thought too much about it. I just thought of the work that needed to be done. Also, at that time, my wife was staying home. She had been an educator and a coach herself, but we had two little boys at home, so she was able to stay home and help raise them during that time. And so it was kind of like the perfect storm in that I loved my job. I wanted to work hard. There's always work to do, and while I wanted to be home with my family, I wanted to be a good dad and a good husband. The times where I was home were times where typically my family was sleeping, and school starts early in a lot of places, right? And so even if I wanted to kind of be there when the boys woke up and spend some time with them, I would already be an hour late to school just because of how those times were not really syncing up. And so I think, now I see it as a little bit of a selfish move on my part, but my wife still to this day is the most patient and understanding person I know, and also knows and gets it the world of education and coaching and sports. It just worked. And we, without really talking about it, we just understood that, hey, it's important for the boys to sleep in the morning. And even though I was an early riser anyway, instead of sitting around in the morning, kind of waiting for that moment to then go, I said, why not just go into school and get some work done? And so what started out as, waking up at 5, getting to work by 6, kids start getting there 7, turned into waking up at 4, getting to work at 5, getting some work done. Then in certain moments, it's looked like waking up at 3:30, getting to work at 4. And although I realized this was probably not the norm, I also realized that, hey, there's work to be done. And it was very quiet. It was very peaceful in the very dark school in those early hours. And it allowed me to at least do enough to catch up or get ahead, whether it was sending out social media, celebrations or schedule things that ADs just do. And that was my day. And I would do that, and the boys and the family would get along fine at home. I would go through the day, do the job, and then the after school activities. Then, whether the practices, making rounds, whether it was the games, and everyone listening probably knows how much time goes into preparing for home contests, football games, basketball, volleyball, you name it. It's not as easy, of course. I'm preaching to the choir. It's not as easy as just unlocking the doors, turning on the lights, and throwing the balls out. But there's a lot that goes into that, and that was work I took extremely seriously, but I was also very prideful. I wanted a top class event anytime there was an event in my school, because I wanted the community to be proud of our school, of our programs, and especially the people, the coaches, and the athletes. And so as this went on, and as I would have weeks where there would be multiple days, 2 or 3 days in a row, where I would get to work by 4, I wouldn't leave till 10 or after until that particular game got done. And I realized I haven't seen my kids in 2 or 3 days. Maybe my wife would still be up when I got home late. We talk a little bit so that I at least saw her, but I was not seeing my children on days. And that really started to break me. It really started to get my mind thinking, like, what the heck is this how it's supposed to be? I love what I do, but I'm missing my kids like crazy. And so conversations at home started, and I started opening up to my wife a little bit. And I'd like to probably remember correctly that, even though she's very patient, very understanding, I think I was starting to run out of some of those second chances with her, because she had to call me on the carpet on several things. I couldn't put my phone down. I wish I could admit that I was playing some type of Wordle game or something on my phone, but it wasn't games. It was checking email, and it was responding to email, and it was looking at the schedule of events for the next day, or it was scrolling social media to look for, what was happening that people were putting out there about my schools and programs. I couldn't shut it off. And even when I'd be sitting right next to my boys on a day I didn't have evening activities, the one thing that I'd been missing so bad, and here I am still on my phone. And so, fortunately, my wife was a really great partner to call me out at the right times and really start bringing some things to my attention. About that same time, too, I was starting to feel some of this pull of, something's not right, because I don't know if I can sustain this. And I love the work. And so wife and I were talking about home of, maybe as our boys continue to grow, I think they were 3 and 5 maybe at the time, do we want a different environment than what we have right now to make that one change? We're not a family that really considers ourselves to move a lot. And is this the right time to make a change so that we, can maybe live the life we want to live? She grew up in Wichita. I grew up out in Western Kansas, where it's real flat, and my dad grew up on a farm. And so that's where my roots were. And so we moved. We moved to Wichita. I got the great opportunity to have that district AD role. Things were a little bit better, but there were still some things that were lacking when, maybe I didn't want to go to that game. I wanted to be home with my family. And it felt like that sacrifice that I know you all know who are listening and watching. There's so many sacrifices that coaches and athletic administrators need to do. But my challenge here, and where I turn the story to where I started figuring it out, is I really had to stop. I had to hit rock bottom. And a lot of that now had happened since the shooting. I went through trauma that day. I deal with mental health challenges still today, and I will for the rest of my life, whether it be anxiety or depression. And I've accepted that. I cope with that. But through those two life impacting events, burnout and hitting rock bottom with knowing I was not spending enough time with my kids, and then also going through that shooting, it made me really think hard on what really is my priority. And as I started, writing my book, reflecting, I started then getting into some questions about what is my identity? Because after I decided to leave education, and I found a role that I very much enjoy as a financial advisor. It's a role where I can still serve very much families and individuals, and talk about life insurance and making sure that they're able to live the life they want to live. But also, when that change happened, that career transition happened, I now felt so lost, because here for the 15 plus years of my life, I had been interacting with thousands and thousands of people on any given day, whether in the hallways of a school with 2,000 kids, at a football game with well over 5,000 people in attendance. And now I was in a small office. I would interact with clients and families, and that was very personal. But it made me think, like, what the heck is my identity? And also, am I even still a leader? And so it was in that deep reflection that I realized that when I was in schools, and where I started losing touch, was it was because my identity was solely tied to my job as an athletic administrator. Now, that's not all bad, because I'm sure everyone that listens or watches this says, well, yeah, man, I identify as an AD. I'm proud to be an AD. I work hard. But also, is that your only identity? Now, I didn't choose for that to be my only identity, but actions speak louder than words. And when I was choosing to go to work at 4 a.m. and choosing to put in all that time, maybe some of it extra time, and maybe some of it that wasn't necessary, but to me, I wanted it to be perfect. So I would put in the extra time. when I thought of identity, I thought that my job was the only thing that defined me. And once I reflected after leaving education, I realized, what the heck was I thinking? I loved being an AD. That's the best job I've ever had. But also, you notice I never once mentioned my family when it came to my identity. And so once I really stumbled upon that, and again, that was not an easy stumble. That was really hard to accept, really hard to think about, felt like a pretty crappy person. And from that moment on, though, I realized that I am fully in the position to make a change. And not just a change, because I'm not here talking to the people, the hardworking leaders on this call, and telling you that you should leave education. No, it's completely the opposite. Kids need great role models in education now more than ever. And so instead of that, by sharing my story, I want everyone to be reminded that no matter how much pride they have in the job or how important the job is, it's still just a job. And your family is there forever. Or those that may not have an immediate family, your extended family, or your friends. Or hey, let's just talk about yourself. You are more important than your job. And so I'm not here to say that you have to pick one or the other. And I used to talk a lot about balance, but I kind of, have thrown balance to the side because are we ever truly in balance 50-50? I mean, good luck finding that. It's like a unicorn. You're never going to find it. But I would instead argue that it's all about priority and prioritizing decisions on whether I'm going to do this with the job or whether I'm going to call it and do this with the family. All of us have that ability to make that decision. And even though we're prideful, even though we want to be at all the events, the reality is we don't need to be at all the events. And look, I'm talking to something I don't know if I still believe in. If some have asked me if I go back to being an AD next week, would I be willing to give up control and not be at all the events? I don't know if I could because I loved being there for the people. I loved supporting my coaches. But also now I know that more than that, where I love to be is with those who I love the most. One more quick story. It was in Olathe when where I worked, and it was with one of my mentors that at that time had moved his way up and worked in HR. And I'd gone in to talk to him about, hey, I'm thinking about looking around. I didn't know if like maybe a state level a sports association role was in my interest or another role at another school district outside of Kansas City. And I'll never forget to this day, he asked me a question. He said, Caleb, what do you think your legacy is? What's your legacy? What's it going to be? And I thought a little bit. And at the time, I just kind of I'd completed my doctorate 3-4 months ago, so I was thinking academic. I was a hard worker. I was an assistant principal. I was athletic director, so I was already all professional thinking, no family. And I answered, I said, I don't know, maybe a principal, that would be a great impact. And maybe that's something next after AD. Maybe a superintendent of a particular school with my doctorate background and my district leadership background. Um, I said, I don't know though. And he did a great job without making me feel foolish. I made myself feel foolish. But he said, okay. He said, my legacy is and has always been my children. And man, did that stop me in my tracks. My legacy is my children. And he said, everything that I've done in life up to this point and everything I'll continue to do is for my children. And then for someone like him who his kids have kids now, it's for their grandchildren. And so that one day, I feel like truly sparked the change and me thinking of how can I do it all while still having no question that my family is my priority no matter what. Jobs will come and go. Jobs are necessary to pay the bills, to take care of your family, but also a job really doesn't define you. It's not your identity. It's what you care about most that's your identity. And I think it's icing on top of the cake when you find a job that you love so much, that you're so passionate about, that truly brings out your inner strengths and your skills, then hey, that's a match made in heaven. But it is still just a job, and family is something that's with you forever. And so as I've continued forward now in this new rediscovery of myself after the shooting, after experiencing burnout, that's how I try to lead my life every day. And I kind of take every day one day at a time. But it always starts and ends with, am I being a good dad? Am I being a good husband? And am I taking care of myself? And if those three things are in check, and those are the ways that I start my day, that I start my thinking, then yes, you can still do what you enjoy to do out in the world when you're not with your kids. Because heaven forbid, we can't hold our kids' hands 24/7, right? That's maybe not proper parenting and not realistic. But if you place yourself in that peace and that peaceful moment and peaceful thinking, then so much more is able to be accomplished, and your mental state will be at that level of peace, so that maybe then when you're having that conversation with the administrative team or your principal about trying to figure out whether you're going to stay at that at the 3 nights events that's coming up, or whether you can say okay when they say, hey, we got it, Caleb, you can go home with your family, that you're able to be in that place of peace and say, hey, you're right. And thank you for covering that. Yeah, I'll go with my family on those 3 nights. I trust you guys. You got it. So that's what I'm speaking to you guys today about burnout. Burnout is in a short notice, know your purpose. And if that purpose is work, I would challenge you. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I would challenge you to dive deeper in that. And what is it about your work that makes it the only priority? And is there not anything else in your life that deserves priority? And even in absence of friends and family, you still have yourself that is worthy of being priority, even up against the job. And when you can put yourself in a state of peace, in a state of comfort, in a state that you know that you're being right by the human you are, the person you are, with those who you love, then the job comes easy. Then it's not a hard decision on whether I wake up at 3:30 in the morning and get into work to get extra work done. You say, heck no, the work will still be there when I get there. And then if it's a matter of taking on some extra supervisions or not, you say, hey, maybe there's somebody else that can do that. And it's okay because I have people I need to be with elsewhere.
Well, you probably saw me scribbling down a ton of notes. Again, we hear this so often with the guests that we have on. The response is, boy, I wish I knew this stuff when I was just starting out, when I was an AD. Um, so many different areas, and I think we need to bring you back on to take a deeper dive into each one. We hear about in the toolbox, work-life balance is one of the most frequently mentioned tools. And as you know, it's never a balance. You've got to do the job or you won't have a job. But at the same time, I love your legacy, because you're absolutely right. Our kids are a legacy. So how do we find and the tweaks on the word balance? Is it compromise or is it relationship? Um, again, prioritizing family. Is it number one? Is it number two? Is it number 17? You got to make sure that you're prioritizing your family at the right level for you. You got to have the job, but again, you don't want to lose your family at the
Yeah.
expense of the job. Great, great stuff. Always fun to spend time with you. Caleb, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, and I already mentioned, Caleb is active as a speaker, as a blogger, as a soon to be published author. Um, if they want to reach out in the meantime, before the book comes out, what's the best way that our listeners can connect with Kaleb Stoppel?
Yeah. So I really leaned into sharing a lot about my healing journey and about some of these really pivotal reflective moments on my own personal Facebook page. And I make a lot of those posts public. And so if you search for me on Facebook, Kaleb Stoppel. I would love to connect that way, and feel free to review and take a look at some of the stuff that I've shared when I've still crossed through some pretty hard valleys and some pretty dark places, but also shared some accomplishments and celebrations as it pertains to navigating trauma, navigating mental health, navigating a lot of things that I would dare to say a lot of those on this call experience. You don't have to get shot to go through trauma. But also, I would love to connect and stay in touch. And my email address is just my first name, Kaleb, and then my last name, Stoppel, at gmail.com. So please reach out if you ever want to talk. It's so important to listen to one another. And, this is not the full focus of this, but take care of yourself, people. I mean, I commend you. I'm grateful for you and the work you do in education for kids and young adults. And just know there's a lot of people out there, even folks like me, that it didn't work out. And I'm finding a different way to lead and serve and care. But it's also very important me to do whatever I can in whatever space I can to remind others that they matter, especially educators and especially our leaders. So thank you for what you do out there, and please continue the good work, and please, please take care of yourself.
Well, Kaleb, thanks for taking time out of your day to share with our listeners. All the best as you continue to be a leader in your field and leader for us as athletic administrators. All the best.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate you.
Hey, we're going to definitely get you back on for another segment. For our listeners, we want to say thanks to you and remind you that we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do the Toolbox Extra about every week, and just about every day we try to share stories along with some best practices from the world of athletics. So please join us the next time for another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Thanks again. Hey, before we go, we want to give a shout out to our great sponsors. Remember, these are all companies that I used as an athletic director. I want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com. Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You'll find them at vitalsignswalloffame.com. Snap Raise, snapraise.com. Huddle, you'll find them at huddle.com. Athletic Surveys, you'll find them at athleticsurveys.com. Sideline Interactive Indoor Score tables and video boards, sidelineinteractive.com. Home Campus, go to homecampus.com. Hometown.com. And Ohio University, check out their athletic administration master's degree. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast.